Mike Reiss is the ESPN NFL Nation reporter covering the Patriots, and he's brought to you by DN Van Lines, Felger's Mover, Ted Johnson's Mover, Beatles Mover, Nick Giamelli's Mover, my Mover. Move like a pro online at dnvanlines.com. Mike joins us on the Volkswagen Dealers Expert Hotline. Hello, Mr. Reiss.
Good morning, Fred, Rich, John. How's everyone doing this morning?
You awake? What time did you get out of there last night?
We were in the maybe 2:30.
Oh, geez.
My goodness.
It's late. It's late.
Thank God for your amphetamine addiction.
I felt like it went late. I don't know. Did you guys stay up? Like, did the interviews, sometimes those happen really fast right after the game. I felt like this one was a little bit drawn out.
Well, Mac was apparently at his locker with all of his stuff still on 15, 20 minutes after the game was done.
He wasn't alone.
I saw that. Yep. I walked in there and just to get a feel for what was going on. And that was probably the thing that stood out to me was he was still in his uniform, sitting at his locker. He had a white sort of Gatorade towel, you know, those towels you see on the sideline, sort of draped over his head, processing everything. And, you know, those are actually, as a reporter, those are moments that's why you go in there. You know, you see how much it affects guys like that, and they put a lot into it, and it was just not good enough performance.
So there was a quote also from Jabril Peppers yesterday. He seemed pretty frustrated with all of it. He said, "I'm tired of us digging a hole like this. You know, we didn't come out in our game down big again." Is this a team that you see being able to stay dialed into winning if they continue to have these losses, especially ones that, you know, looks like they had a shot at winning? Do you think that that locker room strong enough for this not to splinter if things get worse?
So, Rich, I was right there next to Jabril when he said that. He's a fiery guy. He's an emotional, passionate guy, and I definitely felt that, you know, the way he said it. Like, I would say the leadership to me is strong, but you got to see results, Rich. You know, like, I mean, you can get up there and talk about, you know, like Matthew Judon said, you know, hey, I know it doesn't look good, but this is a good team. Like, ultimately, you got to go out and prove that. Right. And so it's a hard question to answer, but I would say with captains that they have, you know, stand up guys, I always take note, you know, David Andrews is always right away, you know, stands up accountable. Matthew Slater, Hunter Henry, you know, Jawan Bentley, Dietrich Wise, like that's a pretty good group, you know, Judon, keep it together. But I would say, like, if we ask the question next week, if they're 0-3 or 2 weeks from now, if they're 0-4, and like, I mean, it's different. You know what I mean? 0-2, you're still a little early, even though the odds tell you, like, that's not a good place to be if you want to be in the postseason.
So these downfield throws by Mac Jones, it's become like pretty bad. And I know that yesterday he was running for his life, and you know, the offensive line in many places was essentially a revolving door. But is it more than that? Because we've seen a little bit of a sample size here, at least enough to possibly make some judgments. Why is there an issue with Mac Jones and downfield passes?
So just to back you up with some numbers, this was something that came through last night. So right after the interception to Xavier Howard, which I actually haven't thought on that, but he was 0 for 6 with an interception on throws more than 10 yards downfield. So I look at the answer as multi-layered, guys. Like, I think first, rightfully what you said was offensive line wise. You know, I'd like to judge it when I see like the full line there that's played together. That's not the case. And that's not the case for a lot of quarterbacks, and you have to overcome that. So I start with that. I think that interception, like, to me, that's as much about the decision as the throw. Yeah. That's like a 50-50 ball against the Dolphins' best corner. And to me, that's probably a decision. You talk more about the decision than the actual throw, which probably wasn't the best placement on the throw either. So I think that's part of it too. And then I think part of it's who is he throwing to? You know, I mean, are those 50-50 balls, or is it open windows? And to me, that you put all that together, and that's why the production isn't there on the deep throws.
Mike, they're 0-2 at home, and you know, it's statistically very hard to get out of. How much trouble is this team in?
seems like they're in trouble to me. I mean, you mentioned statistically. I think I'm going to pull up the numbers as we talk. I think the 17-game regular season helps them a little bit, but
Sure.
you get two games on the road. This is the first time since 1975 that they've opened up a season by losing their first two games of the season on the road. And to back you up, I don't know if you guys talked about this on the numbers. When you're 0-2, playoffs are usually tough. Only 31 of 270 teams that began a season 0-2 qualified for the postseason since 1990. So now they switched from a 16-game regular season to 17 a couple years ago. The Bengals started 0-2 last year. They were in the AFC title game. It's not impossible. But to me, it's like you got to start playing better football if you even want to, you know what I mean? To even mention the playoffs right now seems a little silly.
The coaching decisions have come under fire this morning, and rightfully so. I know you guys tried to get as much as you could out of Bill Belichick about Pop Douglas, but that just seems very, very strange given the fact that this offense is lacking an explosive player, which Douglas is.
And John, if I can, this is just my own take on it. This is just from, and I am interested in your opinion on it. How egregious a fumble do you think Douglas's fumble was? I mean, do you think it was worthy? If you've watched a lot of football, you've watched a lot of Patriots, is that something you saw and was like, wow, like that was a huge mistake. He needs to learn his lesson.
So it was sloppy. He's got to hold the ball high and tight, not leave it vulnerable to someone coming behind him. It was the same. I mean, it was the same play that Ezekiel Elliott had the week before, and he didn't get benched, right? And so I think that's the comparison to me, especially the way that the defender approached the ball carrier to get the ball out. I mean, it's almost the same exact thing. And I think it highlights, how Bill looks at a young player versus a veteran player, because he didn't bench Zeke last week after the fumble. So he's teaching him a lesson with the big picture in mind more than the short term. And obviously I can see why it's easy to question that based on the results and the way they were struggling to move the ball. But that's very consistent over 24 years with young players in him. The first thing I thought of was Stephen Ridley, the old running back from about a decade ago. Remember the same type of thing with him.
Now, taking a look at that Jets team and how they've been playing, and I know that they don't have Aaron Rodgers, are you even confident that this this Patriots team can go into New York and beat those guys? I mean, with that defense, I know yesterday, Fred, you're right. They didn't have the best day, but still.
Their defense was terrible.
We know the talent that they've got there. How are you feeling about next week after seeing what you saw yesterday?
Not great, Rich, not great. And I think it comes back to just the line of scrimmage. Like the offensive line, it's been an issue since the first day of training camp. And that's your weakness against their strength. And I just think it's going to be hard to score points, right? And you almost have to hope that they're struggling to score points without Aaron Rodgers. So maybe you hope that evens out. I think I saw something where they're actually favored, which surprised me, to be honest with you, in terms of the early betting line.
Won 14 in a row, so that's probably part of it.
I know, but then you look at history, right? I mean, they hadn't been 0-2 since 2001. But you're right. You're right with that. But to me, no, Rich. To answer your question, like a game that last week at this time after Aaron Rodgers' injury, you'd think, oh, that's a more winnable game. Doesn't really feel that way to me right now.
All right, so I got to be honest. The last week I chalked it up to being all right. That's a good team. They got close, and for some reason I'm way more depressed about what I saw this week. It does change everything, and I don't even think that Bill O'Brien had a good game plan. I know there wasn't a lot you could do, but it just didn't
execute. You got it. That's the one thing that's shocking in all of this, Mike, is the lack of execution.
Okay, I got a question for Mike. How come they can't stop the run against a team that's not a great running team? When apparently the strength of your best unit is your defensive line.
So I looked at that one, Fred. I'm going to go back and watch obviously the game again, but I think part of what they were doing was protecting against the big play, right? Like, so what do the Dolphins do best? Tyreek Hill finished with five catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. Like, if we were going into the game and you said that's what you're going to hold Tyreek
to win,
you'd probably be pretty happy with it. So it's almost like you're picking your poison to a degree. They could still play the run a lot better than they did, but that was sort of the game within the game, that they were playing. I also wanted to follow up, guys, on one thing. I know we talked last week. We were talking about Jack Jones, and I told you I wanted to dig around on that. Remember we were talking about that?
Yeah. That was,
And I did. And I do want to tell you, it was like a freak injury at practice. That's what I was told. And, a significant hamstring pull, no surgery, I'm told on that, but like significant to the point that like mid-season, but nothing. I feel confident based on just sort of, because I wanted to do that after our conversation.
Yeah.
Just go ask around a little bit and like people who watched it happen, I feel confident passing that along to you that that's legit.
So you're saying it was a freak injury that did affect his hamstring and that he'll be most likely returning. You said midpoint of the season, like somewhere around the midpoint.
In that range. That's what I was told. I feel confident with that. And a couple and then same thing with like Jonathan Jones, their cornerback, not the same timetable. He could be back, much sooner, but like just a freak thing in practice where, turned his ankle and, obviously he wasn't out there for last night's game.
Well, Bill can't even have him practice right anymore. He's screwing that up. He's getting everyone injured with his crazy old school Bear Bryant ways. Cranking the heat and getting its war by attrition. Oh, Mike. All right. Well, listen. When you write something negative, are people upset at you, Mike?
Oh, I know. I think you call it like it is. You start your first two games at home like that in the first quarter, lose the turnover battle. Like you can't sugarcoat that, right? So you just write what it is. It's sort of right.
I got a question. Is your feeling on Mac Jones evolving? Like, how is it evolving? What do you think of? The more you watch him play, how is your opinion swaying?
Like he's lower to me on the list of reasons why they're 0-2. Like I actually, I'm more. I would say I'm more encouraged. At this point, and that's sort of looking at a silver lining based on the bottom line results. I think he's played pretty well, guys, the first two games of the season.
Do you think they're giving him what do you make of Bill O'Brien's offense in the passing game? Do you think they're giving him enough shots? We talked about how he's not overly effective downfield, but then again, he's not. Downfield to him could be 8 yards. He's not he's not big at throwing it vertically.
Yeah, I see. I think he can throw it vertically.
I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying, do you think that maybe he's being hamstrung a little bit?
Well, a little bit. The thing I see offensively is just the lack of a consistent running game, the first 2 weeks. And that comes back to me to the offensive line. And this is not like great sports talk radio, I know, but like to me, until you get the line back and get some consistency there, it's hard to judge what we're talking about. Like 25 carries for 88 yards, 3.5 average. That's not gonna win you too many games. And so I think if they get that, develop some balance, I think we'll start to see things open up a little bit more down the field.
Yeah, you take Mac Jones out of that equation, they ain't near 3.5 carry. I'll tell you that. Mac Jones with that showing a little speed on one of them scampers. You take that out of it, not as much. All right. Well, listen. Mike Reiss, thank you for your time. Thank you for investigating the Jack Jones injury. And
appreciate you guys. Yeah.
The good news is that they're at the Jets next week, so that is always good news. It's a good slump buster. It's like Mark Grace would have sex with a heavy woman when he was in a slump. The Patriots just have to play the Jets. So thank you, Mike. And everyone can read Mike Reiss on ESPN and watch him on ESPN and everything else with ESPN. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys.